Okay, today we're making a door. So last class we made the pieces for the door. Who remembers what the pieces of the door are called? Rails. Vince on the chat, very good. And
Stiles.
Stiles, yeah, rails and stiles. So as you can see behind me, stiles are the ones that go up and down. We can remember those by thinking of stilts, and rails go left and right or horizontal like railroads. So an easy way to remember that. Courtesy of Mr. Marco from the last class. Okay, so stiles and rails. Good. So we made them in record time, and we just need to cut them to finished length. So first question on the quiz today, what's the important thing to remember to do before you cut finished length? Who remembers?
1 inch.
Got one end, square, and check mark it. Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to square one end, and then we're going to cut finished length. So that's what we're going to do, and then we're going to router the pieces. So also from last class, we're going to router the joinery. Who remembers what we call this? What kind of joint do we call that? Tongue and finger?
Oh.
Tongue and groove. Tongue and groove. Yeah, tongue and groove. So it's a very strong joint. There's lots of surface area. And what it also provides is a nice profiled edge for us. Not everybody likes this edge anymore. A lot of doors you'll see nowadays, modern doors are shaker style. They're just straight rectangle. There's no fancy curve on them at all. And I think people like that clean modern look versus the profiles that we've got, the OG profiles or the roundover type profiles. But I think it looks kind of neat. It's simple yet elegant. So we're going to go with that. Plus, it's the only router bits I have for tongue and groove. Crack me up. Okay, so let's cut finished length. We'll do the joinery on the router, and then we're going to see if we can glue it up with a panel in between, a 1/4 inch panel. This is just plywood, so really easy. I don't have to glue anything up for this. I'm just going to stick it in the groove and go with it. Okay, let's go. Hickory. So we made some rails and stiles last class out of hickory. Here it is. So, squaring one end. This is arbitrary. We don't really need to make a mark for this. We're just going to square an end. Good, I get it set up so I'm only cutting about a blade off, a little tooth, and then I'm going to check mark it. Now before I do anything else, I'm going to put a check mark on it so I don't forget. Oh, another thing you can do, if you don't trust your saw, or even if you do trust your saw, is put a square on there and make sure it's actually square both ways. Because what's going to happen is if it's not square, when this goes to line up, especially the ends of my rails with my stiles, there's going to be a little gap if it's not just quite right. So that's why we want to square one end real nice. Okay, 4 check marks. And when I go and I set up a stop block to get these measurements just perfect, and make sure my check mark is against my stop block. If I end up with a piece with no check marks, I'll know I cut off my squared end, and the other end probably isn't square. No good. 13 3/4. That's easy. Take my check marked end, measure off that end, 13 3/4. Of course, we added an inch for rough points, so we got lots to play with. And I'm going to cut that there. Set out my stop block. Any old piece of wood, as long as it's got a pretty straight edge on it, we're happy with it. Have yourself a clamp. If we had a fancy saw, this would be a lot easier. Now, I'm not going to bother to mark my next piece because I have a stop block, but I do have to make sure my check mark goes against my stop block. And if I've done my work right, I'll have both square ends. These are gonna match. Sometimes you got wood chips on the bottom. There we go. And you still got 2 check marks. This end is nice and square. Done. Alrighty. Next 2 pieces are rails. Okay, what we're gonna do is cut some rails and stiles. So, next question on the quiz. Before you change the bit on a router table, what's the very first thing you should do? Go. Adjust. Unplug it. Yeah, bit. We're gonna unplug it to make sure it's not gonna cut my fingers off. I'm gonna unplug it, and then I'm gonna hit the start switch just to make sure it's not still on. Sometimes I unplug the wrong machine. That has happened to me. And just as a reminder, I'll throw the plug up here so nobody comes up behind me and plugs it in. Okay, I'm gonna back off my fence. And we're gonna pull out the existing router bit just to give you a little look at what it looks like here. So to do that, I need to pull out my insert, get that out of the way. And the nuts to loosen are down inside there, so I'm gonna have to raise that whole assembly up with the height adjustment tool in order to get at the 2 nuts. So one nut holds the motor still, holds the arbor or the shaft still, and the other nut tightens the collet. The collet is a tapered insert that the router bit fits into. So I'm gonna hold the shaft or the motor with one wrench, and I'm gonna turn with the other wrench. Now, when you're using wrenches, normally they're almost always angled to one side. The shorter side you're gonna put to the side you're turning to. So this does the bulk of the work, and you want this longer side to be on the top side of your turn. It's just physics. So if you're turning this way, it has to be facing this way. If you're turning the other way, you're gonna wanna turn it and face it that way. So you're always gonna turn towards the shorter side. That's just the way wrenches are made. So I'm gonna back it off. It gets hand loose, and all routers, well, the safe ones anyways, will be hand loose, and then they'll get tight again, and you can't get the bit out. You have one more friction point. You're gonna back this off a little bit more, and then it'll pop out. That's a safety feature. So that second sticky point makes sure that if everything's vibrating and that nut backs off, this thing doesn't come flying out of there on you. So there's always 2 hard points on a safe router table. So we got a couple of bits here. As we explained yesterday, these 2 mirror images of each other. This one's gonna cut a nice big groove for us, and this one's gonna cut a tongue just above it. And then the profiles are gonna match just right. So they're mirror images, or sort of shadow images of each other, opposite images, if you will, and they look like this. So one for the rail, one for the stile. Now this groove we need on all 4 pieces for our panel to slide into on the inside. So we're gonna cut all 4 pieces with the stile one, but we're only gonna cut the ends of our rails with the rail bit. So we're gonna grab the one that has an S on the bottom. Lucky for us, it is marked. It is kind of easy to figure out. This one cuts the groove, this one cuts the tongue above it. If you fit the profiles together like that, you can kind of see it like that this would be the stile one, but it's easier to put a letter on it. So we're gonna do that one first. So I'm gonna put this in, I'm gonna bottom it out, and then I'm gonna lift just a little bit so it's not sitting right on the arm, right on the shaft. If I do that, then it won't vibrate loose, hopefully. Tighten just a little bit. You don't have to go crazy on it. You want to be able to get it back off again. And we're ready to go. The wrenches go away. Insert goes back in. And run. Now we're going to lower it down. Now we're going to lower it to, how do we know the depth? Normally I'd grab some pieces and I'd do some test passes, but instead I'm just going to use a previous project to figure out where to set the depth. So I have an old rail and it's got a groove in it and it's got rail cuts on it. So I can use this to set my depth. If you don't have that, you're gonna have to do a couple of test passes with some scrap pieces to get it just right. If it's too deep, you won't have this lip on the bottom and it might break off. If it's too high, then you will have too much. You'll have too much of a chunk on the bottom for reinforcement, and you'll have no profile here. You won't have something nice to look at. So that's what we really want to maintain. So we're going to lower it so it fits right into this piece, just so. Kind of wonky. There we go. And it's going to ride on the bearing. So there's a bearing at the top here to keep you from cutting too deep. So technically we could use this without the fence, but the safest way to use is for the fence, plus the dust collection collects the dust through the hole. So it makes this more effective with the fence. So we're going to use a fence, but technically you could use this without the fence, just running on this steady bearing here. Okay. We got our depth set. We'll put all our tools away. Chips in there. We're going to reset our fence so that it lines up perfectly with the bearing, so that my piece doesn't wobble as it goes through and it's not further out from the bearing, so my cut isn't deep enough. So I'm setting this right at the bearing. So to do this, usually what I'll do is I'll just grab a straight edge and I'll bring forward my fence just till it touches, and then I'll tighten my handles on the side. And when you tighten, obviously, oftentimes it'll throw off the fence. So I'll snug it, and then I'll get it just right before I tighten it. And I'm going along just so my bearing starts to spin, and there's no rocking. So it won't rock on the bearing back and forth, but it also spins the bearing a little bit. That's how I know my fence is right in line with this bearing. Okay, so my fence is set. So the next thing to do, just like a table saw, is I'm going to use a feather board to hold this in place. So this particular table has some nice machine grooves in it for this little feather board. And I'm going to set it up while it's ready to cut. This holds it a little bit tight. Okay, so how do I know which side to put in, which side to put down, upside down, backwards, which way does this go? When I'm cutting stiles, I'm going to cut the inside of my door. So I'm going to cut the inside groove for my panel to fit into on all four sides. So I'm going to cut the inside of my door. So what I want to do is I want to set it up like it looks like my door and then mark it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my 4 pieces and I'm going to make a door. So I got my 2 stiles, I got my 2 rails. So I got my 2 stiles, I got my 2 rails. So kind of like my door, I'm going to run out of space here. Now that works. Okay. So this does a couple things for me. It shows me I got a really nice fit. All my cuts are nice and square, hopefully. If they're not, you can switch things around. Sometimes if the saw's not cutting perfectly 90, then you'll get a little gap. But hey, that looks even nicer. So this one's pretty plain Jane. I've kind of got a color scheme going here where I've gone dark to light this way. So this could maybe be the bottom of my drawer, light to dark or dark to light. It's really personal preference at this point, however you want it to look. And this is why this is an important part, because you want it to look the same when you're done as when you started. And in order to do that, I'm going to need to make some marks. So if I like this as the look of my door, I've got some cool hickory, some dark light stuff going on here. I need to mark this. So I'm going to take my pencil, and if I want this to remain the same, I'm going to draw arrows pointing in. These point to the inside of my door. So this is where my cuts are going to be. I'm going to cut a stile or groove for my tongue and groove on the inside of this door. I've got 4 arrows pointing in. So I know the inside. And the second thing it tells me is which is my face. The face side is down. So when I go to cut, I'm going to take a stile and bring it over to the router. And my face side, my arrow, is going to be down on the table. That's just the way these bits work. I showed you guys the profile before. The profile, this wavy part, is on the bottom of the bit, so my face has to be down. So my arrow is going to be down and pointing in against the fence for where the cut is. So the arrow's down and facing in so that I cut the surface of my door and not the back of my door. Okay. Okay, so all my grooves are cut. I've got a place for my panel to go. Now I just need to cut the ends of my rails so that they fit in here. So far I don't have that cut yet, so we got to swap out our router bit again. Okay, so I have a test piece that I cut last time. I'm going to see how it fits. It's a little bit high on this. As you can see, these spaces don't quite line up. The thickness doesn't really matter. Main thing is I need these 2 surfaces, my door face, to line up nicely. So what I got to get it close, and then I'm actually going to lower the bit a little bit. Okay, yeah, lower the bit. If I lower the bit a little bit, it's going to drop this guy down, and then I'll recut. So I'm going to do a test cut. Okay. For this one, I'm going to use a miter gauge to keep it 90 to the fence. I'm going to cut through here. Just going to chop this off for a fresh base. Okay, now we're talking. Really nice flush fit between my rails and my stiles. So I can feel that with my finger, really nice and flush. So I'm happy with the height of my blade at this point. We're gonna cut our tongue on the ends of our rails. Now, face down. So the same profile has to match. So we're gonna go face down on these pieces. So that one's easy. I can just see the profile and put the profile down on the router table. And we're going to cut both ends of the rail to fit into the stiles. Now, to prevent breakout. So if you guys remember, if I talked about this in grade 10, a tree is like a bundle of straws. It's like this. So as I'm cutting along here, the last straw goes beep and breaks out. We call that breakout, a bunch of slivers that come off the back, and it doesn't look nice. So to prevent that, I'm going to take my scrap piece and I'm going to run it behind my good piece. And this edge is going to act like a continuation of that piece so that when I cut this rail, it gives support on the back of that so that this little piece doesn't go boop. Instead, the crap piece goes boop out the back. All right. Hey guys, so we got 2 rails and 2 stiles. Oh, look who's here! Hey there! How's it going? Just making some doors. It's too late. They saw your slippers.
Nice to see everybody's names.
Oh, a very shy crowd here.
I'm Juvraj.
Well, I get to see Stanley and Lyra.
Oh, I tell her.
Sometimes Ben. What's going on?
We'll come
My
back.
name's Juvraj.
Oh, okay.
Mr. Carmoli doing?
What do you think? As good as it gets. This?
I'm Juvraj.
Thanks.
Have fun.
Will do. See you shortly. Okay. So we got a door and it fits. Woohoo! but it's got a hole in the middle. So unless you want a see-through door, I mean, some people like that. They prefer to put glass in here or something. We're not going to do glass, too expensive. We are going to cut a piece of plywood to fit in there. So there's a few ways to do this. You can do a bunch of math and you can measure it, the length of your stiles subtracted from the net width of your rails without the groove, and so on and so forth. We're just going to draw some lines, some pencil lines, and those pencil lines are going to tell us how big to make this. So the easy one is the width across this way, because the width is just going to match our rail. So the length of our rail is going to be the width of our panel across here. Well, that's easy. We already have that finished width, which is 10 1/4. So 10 1/4, we saw from our board here, our rails finished length is 10 1/4 for our rails right here. So that's going to be the width of our panel. Now, how about the length of our panel? Now this gets tricky because it fits between, it fits in this groove and it fits in the top groove. So there's a few ways to do this. All I'm going to do is I'm going to make a couple of marks. So I'm going to reach inside here. I'm going to make a little pencil mark here. If the lead's long enough, this pencil's running out. And I'm going to make a little mark here. And where those marks end is the length of my panel. So I've got 2 pencil marks in here that I can measure to. So let's do that. I've got 1/8 under 10 inches. So we are going to go 9 7/8. 9 7/8 is going to be the one for us. Okay, so grain direction up and down across for our width. And we're going to go and glue it in. So of course, before we glue, the first thing we're going to do is what? Who remembers? Gather clamps from Mr. Camilla. Thanks. Don't all shut out at once. Dry fit. Yeah, Lyra. Woo. Whoop. Make sure that it fits with no gaps or crazy gaps at least. We have a certain a tolerance, allowable tolerance in cabinet making. If you're German, then the tolerance is nothing. But if you're Canadian, the tolerance can be quite a lot. We're very tolerant, us Canadians. You could have quite a lot of tolerance here. That's not to say that Germans aren't tolerant people, by the way. I was only referring to their machining standards and how well they make everything. They like to machine things to perfection. So that's all I was referring to there. So I can get this tight. I just want to make sure that I can eliminate these gaps. This might be a little bit too wide for this door. So I am going to clamp this just to make sure that it's going to fit okay. Okay, I'm getting a little gap here. Oh, I might have to trim this down, but better trim it down than have it too short. That's the main thing. But I think I don't like this little gap that I'm getting here. So I'm going to pull it apart, check for slivers. And if there are none, then I'm going to have to zip this guy down a little bit. We're going to take off not even a blade width, like half a blade width off of our panel to make sure that it fits just nice. I'm not even German, so I'm not biased. These are just stories that I've heard. I told you guys the drill bit story, right? There was a international drill bit competition, and the Canadians did pretty good, except the Germans produced a drill bit that could drill a hole through the Canadian drill bit. Yeah, it's tight tolerances, baby. Okay. I'm still getting a little gap, so I'm thinking it's more so my milling that's doing that. So I'm okay. We're good with that. We're going to go with it. Because I'm not German. Could I bring up the Germans more in this conversation somehow? Okay, so we got a door. We're going to glue it. Now, I'm not going to glue everywhere. I'm not going to glue all the joints all over the place, all the grooves and all the tongues. I'm only going to glue in the four corners where these things are going together. The panel I'm not worried about. It's such a tight fit that that panel ain't going anywhere. So we're going to pull this apart and put it back together in the same orientation that we had it in for our first fit. And all I'm going to use is a paintbrush to get into those small joints and a little yellow glue. And I got some paper towel here for the fingies. Okay, so rails. We're only going to put glue. Oh, that might have something to do with it. Full of slivers. Probably why it's not fitting as well as it should. Okay, rest looks good. Glue. So I'm going to get some in the front of my tongue and the back, and I'm just going to spread it. And I've added some extra just so I get some on my brush and a little on the end grain. And this glue is going to squeeze out and it's going to get on my panel. There had to be a little extra glue to hold my panel in place as well. So I'm not going to put any glue on my plywood. We've had students glue all kinds of places before. Very extra and unnecessary. Good day.
You are making a cabinet. No.
That's right.
Yeah.
Cabinet doors. Mrs. LaBute is here. Everybody can say hi, Mrs. LaBute.
Uh-oh. Sorry.
That's okay. And Ms. LaBute, do you prefer shaker style doors or ornate style doors? Nobody turns their camera on.
Oh, okay. Shaker or ordinary?
Yeah, like do you like a little profile on your cabinets like this?
Yes.
Or do you prefer just the normal rectangles?
This is the
shaker
style in my house.
Nice.
Yeah.
You got the same cabinets.
They're probably the those. They're not great. They make it harder to clean.
Make it harder to clean. That's why
Yeah.
people steer clear of these and go for the shaker. You can just run a, yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely. You can just run a rag over it or run your vacuum over it sometimes. Not at all, not at all. Thanks for checking. Okay, take care. Awesome. Okay, we got lots of squeeze out here. Not too much, but some, which means we got a good amount of glue in the joint. And I'm not going to wipe these, resist the temptation to just wipe the glue away. You guys can't even see. Resist the temptation to wipe the glue away. Instead, we can wait. We have the time. Wait till it gets a little gummy and then scrape it away. So, did we get rid of the holes? Almost. Oh, yeah. Let's see what we can do with these clamps. Okay, door done. So, at the end of the day, this is the door that we glued last class. What we can do here is get a little scraper, get a glue scraper, something, and just come along here and tidy up these, tidy up the old glue here. Did you already do this, Mr. Kamali? Oh, you already did it. Nice. I was like, where's all the glue? Oh, you're the man. So Mr. Kamali already took care of the glue for us. Awesome. Thank you.
Mr. Kamali's just the best.
Haha. You heard it here first, folks. The best. Okay, door done.